let's get into the. Do you want to do the review first, or do you want to do the segment first? What's your druthers?
Interesting. I think let's do the review first, and then
Done.
Yeah.
Tale of the Tape, Aura et Labora is a 2011 release. It was by Uwe Rosenberg. The artist was Clemens Franz, and the publisher was Lookout Games, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think Lookout Games is the publisher now of the new edition that is about to come out. When you look at this game, it looks a little bit like Agricola. It really, Clemens Franz and so on and so forth. It is the story of. Tell us, what is the game about?
The story is about you're basically a monastery. I think you start off as, right. So you're a couple of monks and a prior, and throughout the game you are expanding from that point, your original monastery or village, into these settlements. 4 or 5 settlements you get to build during the game, with multiple buildings that happen all around them, and each one of those buildings is an action space for your workers, right? Also, in the midst of this, you are, you're farming, you're selling things, you're, creating, different, like straw and sheep and clay, and you're basically building and creating all these different resources that you can use in different ways throughout the game, ultimately to earn victory points. And then also there's a special set of resources, right? Like there's a Bible, and there's a
reliquary
and this pot, an urn or a pot. So there's these other little, 3.
It's a very Catholic game. Let's just say that. Just say that. Yeah, you're building and expanding a monastery and the community that is growing up around that.
Yes.
And there are 2 different versions of the game that you can play. They all come with the base game, and one is you can play it in Ireland, and the other one is you can play it in France.
Yeah.
The difference is significant. The large number of the buildings are completely different from one version to the other. Even the resources are different. In France, you can be making bread, you can be making wine. In Ireland, oh my goodness. In Ireland, you could be making beer and whiskey, which I find only slightly offensive, while being historically accurate. So interesting things about the game. You start off with a small hand of cards that are settlements. Settlements are going to be things that you're going to put down on your board and build, and they're going to score points. They score a small amount of points themselves. They score a large amount of points by the buildings that are orthogonally adjacent to them. The building to their north, south, east, and west all score with that building. So by putting settlements in a checkerboard fashion, or even next to each other in the right fashion, you can score the points that one building has for their settlement point value multiple times, sometimes 2, 3, possibly even 4 times. 4 times, which could be a huge benefit, in the sense that you're spending the same amount of resources to build these buildings, but you can get bonuses that are calculated 2, 3, 4 times. Which could be a huge thing. So one of the big ways to score points is to build settlements around your monastery, and to to put buildings around them that are going to increase the value of that settlement. That's one way. Another way is by collecting and upgrading resources. You can make the aforementioned bread. You can make the aforementioned wine. And then there are things that will you trade in a wine and a bread into the monastery, and they will give you the Bibles. They will give you holy books, which are worth victory points at the end of the game. They will give you reliquaries, which hold precious things of the faith, which give you a lot more victory points, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things that you can get points for, all the way up to things called wonders, which are worth 30 points in the game each. Oftentimes, in the last game we played, there were a couple of ways to get them. One was to have 4 of the most expensive special things that you could have and trade those in for a 30-point wonder. And another one was to have 13 different kinds of goods and trade in 13 different kinds of goods and to get a wonder that way. Which is really, really interesting because that tells you there's a lot of different types of goodness in this game. And in truth, I think we figured out somewhere around 18, right?
Yeah, somewhere 15 and 18, somewhere in there. It might be 16. I think 16 is like the sweet spot when we get.
I think the entire game has 22 different types of goods, but any particular
depending on what version.
Exactly. If you're playing Ireland, some are there and some are not there.
Yep.
Which is very, very interesting and very, very complicated. The buildings that are available, each part of the game, start to send you down a path, but not really.
Right.
Because there's something called the work order. What's the work order?
The work order is a way that you can pay an opponent to use their building / worker space. And it starts off just by you just have to pay them 1 coin. But in each version of the game, there is a special building that once it is built, then that price doubles to 2. But there is another way around work orders, which is an interesting mechanic where in the one version of the game where there's whiskey, and then in the France version where you have wine, you can take that whiskey or wine over to your opponent, offer that to them, get them drunk, and then they'll do the work order for free.
I don't think it has anything to do with them getting drunk. I mean, these are men of the cloth, okay? It is about them accepting that as a sacred tribute, and I'm sure they put it in a deep cell somewhere, and then they give it to the abbot or something along those lines. So, which is to say that you have only 3 workers. You have 2 regular monks, and you have a prior. The prior is a sort of higher level monk. The prior is only different in one sense. When you build a building, if your prior is available, he can go right on that building, activate it immediately, and take the benefit of it, which is great because in a game where everyone has the same number of actions, 20, 30, 40 actions in the entire game, this is a way to essentially get 2 actions on 1 turn. You'd play that right, and you can get some serious points. You can do some serious damage that way. But being able to pay somebody else to use their workers on their own buildings can sometimes be really good for the person who is getting paid, because money is a very valuable thing to have in this game.
Sure.
You can buy additional territories. You start off with just a plot of land that has trees on it, that has peat bogs. You have to clear those trees and clear those peat bogs to build on those sorts of spaces, which makes it very much like Agricola Farmers on the Moor, which we'll talk about in a second. But in addition, you could build more lowlands, more highlands, you can build coastland. You can build mountain areas on various sides of the board at a slowly increasing cost over the course of the game, which is an interesting mechanic. Being able to pay somebody to put their worker on a space makes this game more than multiplayer solitaire, right? Because you are buying buildings from a common stock, which is not multiplayer solitaire because, you built the building that I wanted to build, right? I put my worker on this space and I take this resource. Now there's none of that resource left. That makes it not multiplayer solitaire because it creates a situation where, I wish I had done that. Elder was unfortunately to my left this last game we played, and the small little sound of disappointment as I did the thing that he was about to do is just... It's just one of the most precious things in life. You really have to hear it. It's like a little baby bird dying. It's absolutely wonderful. I highly encourage you guys try it.
And it happened at least 2 or 3 times.
I think it was like 2 or 3 times in a row at one point. And I was like, I'm just in fuego right now. Elder and I were sort of heading the same way for a little bit until we eventually diverted, and then that happened less. But it does happen a lot. So let's just talk about Uwe Rosenberg for a second.
Sure.
His first big game was in 1997, which was Bonanza, which is an amazing game. It really is. It's one of the most unique card games ever. I've never seen another game that plays that way that card game does.
Yep.
And then for the next 10 years, he put out a couple other small games, But he kept putting out expansions and expansions and expansions to Bonanza, just tons and tons of them. This is a guy that okay, I got a hit here. I'm going to milk this for every cent that it's worth. And guess what? Those expansions are pretty good. They're really interesting. And then in 2007, he made a sharp right turn and he made Agricola, which changed everything. And then he put out several expansions to that. In 2008, he put out Le Havre, another one of my favorite games. Absolutely love it. 2009, At the Gates of Loyang, which is a good game. It's a good, if it wasn't for the fact that Le Havre and Agricola came before it, it might be a tremendously well-regarded game. But in comparison to those two, not quite as much. In 2009, he also put out a expansion to Agricola called Farmers on the Moor, which just between you, me, and the wall is the better way to play Agricola. I love Farmers on the Moor. I think it's a better game. Everyone says that Agricola is an amazing game, but everybody has to do family growth. You can't avoid it, and because you have to do that, a certain amount of your choices are going to be more scripted than you might want them to be.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
Because you have to expand your house, which means you have to get the wood, or you have to get the reed, and you have to do this, and you have to do these sorts of things. And sure, when somebody else has done that before you, you have a hard choice, and you got to choose what else you're going to do. But it does take some choices out of the category of being hard choices and become clearly I have to do A as opposed to B. Yep. Farmers on the Moor does a fairly decent job of combating that. Now, you still want family growth. You still want to increase the size of your family, but now you got to heat your home. And instead of having a wide open space in which you can build anything you want, you have forests and you have peat bogs, and you have to clear them before you can start building things that you want. And those peat bogs are really important because that peat is the stuff that you're going to burn to heat your house. The bigger your house, which in original Agricola is what you want because that's how you can have more family members so you can take more actions, all of a sudden requires more heat. So now there is an added burden to increasing your family size, and that burden is significant. It slows down the family growth in the game, and it makes other plays a lot more palatable and a lot more interesting. It's a really good expansion. I highly recommend it. And I'm bringing it up because Ora and Labora does a very similar thing. And there's no family growth. There's no expansion. You have the same number of actions. The only way to get more actions is to use your prior to take an action. Some buildings essentially give you a whole second action in them. But those are very, very expensive buildings. And you're giving up on building 2, 3, or 4 different things in order to build these one things that give you a very strong advantage. The idea that you take these resources and you clear the space, which allows you to build buildings there, started with the Farmers on the Moor, and I think Oren Labora does a really, really good job of building that. But the most interesting thing about Oren Labora probably is the resource wheel. It's a real. How do I put this? I bought Ora and Labora. I've had it sitting on my shelf.
Sure.
When I go and look and what games am I going to sell, I've never even considered selling it. Yep. But I also haven't played it in years. Haven't. I played it. I thought, oh, this is a really good game. I think I still prefer Agricola, especially if I'm playing Farmers on the Moor. So I was really happy when you said, I want to review this. Because it's been going for a lot of money on eBay, and now they're coming out with another reprinting of it, and I'm really happy that they are. And I was happy to get the game out, and I have to say, I love this game, Elder. I love this game.
Yeah, so good.
It is so cool. It is so much fun. It's so interesting. It plays so differently every time. There's so many different strategies, really good, hard, meaty decisions that you have to make constantly in the game. Thank you for bringing it back to me, but let's talk about that resource wheel, because the most different thing about the game, and probably the most elegant thing about the game, is this resource wheel. Like I said, you've got the game comes with 22 different resources. Any particular game is playing with probably 18 different resources. Right. And it all springs from the core 6 resources that you start the game with: your sheep, your wheat, your clay, your wood, peat,
money,
and money.
Yep.
right? It starts with those, and then there'll be a couple more. The stone will come in later in the game as a main resource, not exactly a basic resource. Tell us how the wheel works.
Yeah. So the wheel is set up so that at the very start of the game, all the resources that are at 0. The needle that goes around is doing a couple different things. So it's marking the rounds. It's also telling you when you can build the settlements because you can't build them at any time, right? And it's also tracking how the resources expand in the game, right? So as the wheel continues to move around and nobody takes a particular resource, then that resource will grow and get to be more, right? For instance, if you have the straw start on the 0 space, once it moves 2 or 3 times, then 3, 4, or 5 straw will then be available for the player who takes it. When the player takes it, which requires moving one of your workers to a building, to an action space, then they take that marker and move it down to 0, and now that's gone, right?
Which can be devastating.
It could be devastating. Again, the timing is so interesting in this game. You could be, just really need that 5 or 6 grain, and you're just about to take it, and then the player takes it before you, or you really need that wood because settlements are coming up. They're vital to your strategy. Not getting the resources that it happened to me last night, actually, where I had to wait 2 or 3 rounds to get stone, which I needed to build another building.
You and I both had the quarries. We were the 2 people in the game that built quarries, so we can take that. And somebody paid you to put your own darn worker on your own stone quarry.
Yeah. And you can't refuse contracts.
And you can't refuse them. So they took your stone.
Yeah.
They took your stone. Now, I told them that they shouldn't do that, that you have a violent temper, that, you've done time, and that you're not afraid to go back. But they did not listen. It is a really, really interesting thing that the choices that you have, like peat is at 6.
Yeah.
If I cut peat right now, I'm going to open up a space on my board to put down another building.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get 6 peat, which I don't directly need, but each peat is worth 2 heat. And all of the settlements that you're building, most of them require a certain amount of heat. 3 heat, 5 heat, 6 heat. They can require some serious heat, and you need to build these settlements. When the settlement phase happens, everybody builds one settlement. It is a really important thing to do. But is that the right thing for me to do? It's at 6. Somebody's going to take it eventually. Are they going to take it now? Yeah. But at the same time, I look over and my friend Elder has exactly the resources necessary to build that building that's out there. I have the same resources. Oh, do I build the building? Because if I take the peat, he might snake the building from me. If I take the building, he's definitely taking the peat, and then I might not have enough heat generation to do what I need to do afterwards. It creates some wonderful, wonderful, really complicated math that you're going to do in the game. And I would say that in some games of a lot of resource management games, there will be resources that just don't really play into the way the game panned out this time, right? That, this resource was really kind of undervalued in this game and everybody kind of ignored it. You can't ignore any resource in this game because eventually it's going to get up to take one action and get 7 or 8 of something. Right. And I don't care how devalued it is. If you're getting 7 or 8 of something, there's things you can do with every single one of them. And there is not a resource in the game that there isn't some building that has a way of converting that into something much, much better.
Exactly. And this is one of the wonderful spaces of the game is that tension when the resources really get high. And again, I feel like it always happens to me at least once or twice during the game where, you say that phrase, that's just too much grain to leave out there. Too much clay to leave out there. I got to take it. Or money. Right, like there's some games where you'll see money will get up to like 7 or 8, and it's like I got to take it. Right?
Oh yeah.
You don't ever have to. And again, like I think that's one of the great puzzles of the game is deciding, because I think it's winning the game is I think greatly determined. Is it and actually bringing it back up? Even though I played it, a lot more recent. I try to play it or at least a few times a year. It's definitely one of my favorite games. It's just one of Jennifer's favorite games. So if we're together, it's always an option to get it onto the table. But playing it this round in preparation for this episode, I definitely got a different perspective on the game and particularly the end game. Right,
because you played it with a bunch of jerks.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but
he's nodding. No. He is nodding right now.
But yeah, it's interesting because I used to be, again, I didn't win either one of the sessions that we played. Right.
True. I think you came in second in both, or second and third. Like. The scores were very close. There was a runaway 2 games ago,
right?
But the other 3 people were really, really close.
Yeah.
And then this last night's game, everybody was close. I mean,
yeah.
I think the first and last place were separated by 10, 15 points maximum, and the top score was 220. Right. So everybody was right up there.
Yeah, and that's I think that's a winning score, 220, 225. Mm-hmm. And it's really about that last 30 points. Like, how are you going to get that 30 points?
Yep.
Which really requires buying one of those there's a big building in either one that has like a ton of points on it, right?
I built both the palace and the castle.
Right.
And exactly. I didn't win.
Yeah. And again, like, and
3 points shy.
Right. And how that's combated is, again, by building the wonders, right? Now, again, those wonders are 30 points, but again, you got to, depending on how you do it, you have to turn in 14, 15 points to get it. So it's only a 15-point swing.
Right.
But if you do that twice, it's 30 points. But again, even that might not be enough to win. Something else has to happen. Like, again, in this particular case, you got blocked from doing something that, would have earned you some more points. And then there was...
Which is part of the game. I mean, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a good move on David's part to do exactly that. And it brought him across the finish line.
Yep.
It does seem that... I focused in both games on settlement strategy. I was getting big settlement points, building really good buildings next to them. In this particular game, people were using my buildings all the time. I was collecting massive amounts of money.
Yeah.
But that comes at a cost, right? I had turns when I desperately needed to use one of my own guys on a building, and I didn't have any available.
Yep.
So that'll slow you down real fast. There is something, I think there might be a strategy in this game where do not buy the most desirable buildings, or at least don't buy too many of them.
Right, but again, you can't
entirely predict what that's going to be.
Yeah, and also what the other players are going to do.
Yep.
Right, if they're ignoring your buildings because they got something cooler to do on their own board, or they have another direction. Again, it's just so situational, which again is part of what I think makes the game so interesting and fun and just very interactive. And it's just the experience of, so when I teach the game, I make it a point to describe it as a settlement building game, right, with resource management in it.
It's very good that you do that, by the way, because I do think that the cheapest points to get in the game are settlement related.
Yeah.
And everything else has the costs are built in.
Yeah,
the costs have been mathed out by Uwe Rosenberg, and he knows what they are. But because you can score a building multiple times when you have multiple settlements next to it, you can get a multiplicative effect on some buildings, and that can really up your score.
Right, and you want to target, I think, an average, I would say, of about at least 18 points per settlement. You're gonna get to build most likely 5 settlements. Again, if you want to target as an in-game goal building that 6-1 in some way. But yeah, I think in both games you scored 100 points just in settlements.
That's right,
which made the difference. My settlement game the first time. Again, I don't know what I was doing that first game. Right? I think part of what was going on was I was trying to be the kind of
the teacher
of the game, and so making sure everybody, there's a lot of stuff to follow.
Yeah, your head was not in the game competitively, and I cleaned your clock. I stole your wallet. I apologize.
Yes. My settlement game was much better. The second game was a lot more focused. I felt like the other players had a much better handle grasp on the game.
Yeah.
But that said, like I think about my earlier scores where I used to get like over 200. I was like more competitive. Also, the game plays, I think, a lot differently between whether there's 3 players or 4 players.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So
yeah,
the scores can vary a lot that way too. But one of the things, again, I love to win, right? I love to win a game just as much as anybody else. Something I think one of the things that keeps bringing me back to this game and why I consistently play it is that I don't care as much. There's something about the experience of this game, this slow building and accumulating these resources and these options to make these big moves. Like I was really impressed by a gentleman sitting next to me who had that really big what was it, bread move?
Oh, Aaron, yeah, he turned like 20 flour into bread, and just was massive.
Yeah, I think that was like the biggest, of those I've ever seen before. And then he was able to take the wood and I guess straw that he had left over and convert that into like a good like 10, 12 points at one of the buildings. So I think that's something that's missing from a lot of games is, just the ability to make a really big move. There's something really satisfying when you make a 20, 30 point play in a game that you can win with 220 points.
And it's something I've talked about in the past about tangibility.
Yeah.
Agricola is amazing because even if you come in last place, look, I had this farm, it started with nothing, and look at this farm. Look at the little fences, and look at all the little animals that are in that fence and the ones that are in that one. And look at all those fields, and look at all the grain that's piled up. That's amazing. That's beautiful. Yeah. I came in dead last, but I feel like I like my little farm that I built. It feels really good. This game is only slightly less tangible than that because you look at all these settlements and look at the castle that I built up on the hill and look at the fishing village I have down by the sea and all those sorts of things. And what you were saying, Aaron's got just all of these resources next to his board. Miles and miles of bread. I mean, he's opened multiple bakeries, and and I had all of these casks of wine that were sitting there, and it does, there is a built-in satisfaction in playing a game that has a high level of tangibility, where the abstract is made real, and you can see before you, and you can get a sense of accomplishment regardless of what the score is, and that's always great.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're sort of on the fence on this one. Feeling a little so-so.
Yeah, definitely my favorite of his games.
This is. I mean, it has Le Havre and it has Agricola and it has Farmers on the Moor. It's kind of a combination of all 3 of those games because Le Havre, famously, it is Paul's White Whale. It's the game that Paul just can't figure his way through that game, and invariably it comes down to the situation where fish are kind of devalued in that game at a certain point later in the game. And they'll pile up, and there'll be like 10 fish, 12 fish on the space. And we're always looking at Paul saying, "Don't do it, Paul. Don't do it." And he always takes the fish, always does. But that's just like that wheel. It's just like the wheel. At a certain point, it just makes sense, and you kind of have to do it. Right. It's just hilarious that it always ends up being him. But when it comes out, Ora and Labora should be something that you consider. That's something that you look at. If you like the games like Agricola, if you like games like Le Havre, if you haven't played games like these, you should play those first and see if you like them. If you do, you're going to love Ora and Labora. It is fantastic. The fact that there are 2 different games in the same box, that the Irish side and the French side play considerably different. The buildings are very different. And so even though you're still playing the same game, it's not like the major strategies change.
Right.
But all of the paths change.
Yeah.
All the paths to get to those strategies change. So we could not recommend it more highly. Ora and Labora should be coming out very, very soon. Should be in stores any day, any month now.
Yeah. And I've also been, thinking for quite a long time about doing a Africa expansion
That would be
for
phenomenal.
this game.
That would be great.
Medieval Africa is not a theme that really a lot of people know much about at all, and I think there could be some, and it's very rich, as you can imagine. That period between kind of Egyptian and slavery, and I think it would be really cool to kind of play around with that space and come up with some different resources. And
that would be amazing. Yeah. And by the way, you cannot copyright a mechanic, so it doesn't need to be an expansion. It can just be your game.
Yeah. I think I probably will start there, and again, I have thought that it might actually translate into a whole nother game. So one of these days, I might start it tomorrow.
Do it.
Yeah,
I would love to. I would love to play test that with you. I would love to check that out.
Awesome.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.